And if you have a pressing problem that really hurts you and you're in denial or ignoring it because you don't believe anything can help, and I have a solution, I feel like I have a duty to push as hard as I can to get you to buy it, because no one's ever going to be like, man, I love that product and it solved my problem. I just wish you wouldn't have tried to sell it to me so hard.
Word to the cloud. And here we are. Hey, everyone who doesn't know, this is the good, how do I say your last name, Colin? Is it Theriot or Theriot?
It's Theriot. It rhymes with stereo.
Oh man, I never would have guessed. I was saying it wrong in my head for like 5 years now or so that we've actually.
That's all right. It's very common. Like you can tell immediately if someone is from where I'm from because they say it right the first time.
Where are you from?
I'm from southern Louisiana, right on the coast, Bayou Lafourche.
I'm from Massachusetts, and my last name is Haddad in Massachusetts, but everywhere else it's Haddad because people can't say Haddad because they don't have like the awesome Massachusetts accent
right.
to kind of fall back on.
Is it Haddad or Haddad?
So technically it's Lebanese, right? So technically
right.
It's Haddad, I think is how it's supposed to be said.
Oh, right. Little throat noise in it.
Yeah, exactly. When people move to Massachusetts, they stop enunciating. It's that kind of talk like this, so it becomes Haddad.
Yeah,
I was just thinking when I invited you onto this, I was remembering, I think it was like 5 or 6 years ago when I sent you that like over the top weird fucking mess. I think it was the first time we really interacted on Facebook.
Yeah. It was kind of my fault. We had like I had left a comment on one of your posts and you were like, man, what the hell? And I was like, it's cool. I'll take it off. I was just messing around.
I wonder what you said. Because that was like, that was back before I got properly medicated and all that stuff. And I was so far in my own ass about things. So
yeah, I have an agreement with the fella that it was in reference to just not talk about each other.
Ooh. Oh man, I wonder who. That's awesome. I bet it's somebody else I know. I also like how you and I tend to talk behind the scenes sometimes when some of our marketing friends go off on crazy.
That's right. We have snitch chat.
Yeah, exactly. We're like, okay, you're one of the few sane people in our business. What are we supposed to do?
I try.
Let's get into it a little bit. Like, so, we've known each other for like 5 or 6 years now, I guess. We become friends, just chatting, and we talk about stuff. But I actually know, besides you having your awesome Facebook group, the Cult of Copy, I don't really know much about how you got into this or how you got started. I just know that you and I have fascinating conversations about cults and serial killers and other shit when we chat.
Right.
How did you start? How did you kind of get into this whole marketing world? Because you were never like a freelance direct marketing copywriter or anything, right? Or what did you do?
I did it briefly, but that's kind of the middle part of the story.
Yeah,
so,
okay,
I went to art school, which is the opposite of marketing in a way, but also it's an art school where I learned the art of bullshitting because, you don't get graded on the work, you get graded in the talk about the work. So you just kind of, in the parochial educational system, within the limits and constraints we're working in, my vision was unable to be realized on these artificial deadlines. So here's what I meant to do, and I didn't realize it at the time, but that
is the art of bullshitting. Yeah,
very very relevant to our mutual career. But through that, this was like in the mid 90s, of like 96 to 2000.
How old are you now, roughly?
43.
Yeah, I'm 44. So about the same.
Okay. Yeah. So, 96 through 2000. So like pre-internet bubble bursting and all of that, websites were a big thing. I worked in art, did web design. It was a thing that made money at the time and it was easy for me to do. Pursued that after college. Cause again, don't really make money as an artist. Definitely not at the time. Ended up moving to the Atlanta area.
Before you go any further on that in the art school thing. So were you doing like visual art stuff, or what was your?
I have a degree in painting and drawing.
That's interesting. So here's the thing for me, right? So my background back in the day when I was a kid, right? Like I did theater, I did music, I played drums in the school band and all that stuff. And even when I moved to Seattle, I was doing acting and theater stuff for a long time.
Right.
And there was this real prejudice against the idea of marketing and sales and the idea of using your creativity in any way for like to actually make money versus that pure kind of artistic sensibility where it's supposed to be for the work. Did you ever have
Correct.
anything like that as far as like, did you have like this ambition to be like a great visual artist, or what was your goal when you were doing that?
Well, I always came about it on the commercial side because what I really wanted to do was draw comic books, actually.
Okay.
And
cool. Awesome.
it turns out there are like huge amounts of people that are way talented than me, way more talented than me, and want to work harder.
All over the world too.
Yeah. And want to work harder than me.
And it's like a 90-hour a week job. You're trying to do a page a day, I think, as a comic book artist.
It is because it's like 22 pages of material per issue, and then one issue per month. And in fact, like it ends up being 13 issues per year because they'll do like an annual or whatever. Anyway,
that's a lot of stuff to draw.
So when I got out of school, I continued pursuing the web design thing, and I moved to Atlanta from Louisiana, and did web design for like 2 or 3 different companies. And one I ended up at was a wedding favor company. That this guy, Brad Fallon's wife, ran. And he was like,
I think I know Brad Fallon.
He was
Stompernet back in the day.
Correct. So
I worked for Brad once years ago. I wrote a sales.
Nice.
Way back in the day.
I'm not sure where that fits in the timeline, but basically, I was doing like SEO type stuff with them, and Brad and his partner at the time, Andy Jenkins, rest in peace. Got together and did Stompernet while I was working at the wedding favor company. And I've just always been a kind of guy who's like, shit needs doing, I'll volunteer to do it. So they needed, like, I think the first letter for the launch that like Frank Kern worked on it, Andy worked on it, some other people, I'm not sure. Like Mike Long was around at the time. What happened was, I think I did the HTML actually on the very first Stompernet letter. Like I remember being up at like 3 a.m. with going back and forth with Andy on Skype. This is
long form. There's no video. This is like,
correct.
This is 2008, 9, something like that.
Yeah, 2008, I believe.
That's right when I was getting into this business as well. It was right around 2008.
Yeah. And then obviously that was a hugely successful launch. And then over the next few months, they were ramping it up as a startup because originally it was just going to be a box of DVDs, and they decided to make it like an $800 a month membership. So they added a bunch of experts to be faculty in the Stompernet University. So
that's I think this is what I may have written a letter for, because Brad hired me. I was in LA for John Carlton's event, or for Sang, I think it was, and I met Brad, and he paid me $10,000 to write a letter that was for some kind of newsletter or some kind of ongoing thing with experts that was going out every week. They were trying to figure out.
They did all kind of things at Stompernet, but one of the things they did was the Net Effect, which was a print magazine.
Net Effect was what I wrote for back in the day.
It was a print magazine that we put out monthly. I have a few issues of that still somewhere with some completely outdated SEO knowledge. So over the next few months, they like staffed up, and I became more and more involved with it. Like they had a live event that I attended allegedly to learn SEO stuff for the wedding favor company. But I'm like, hey, I'll volunteer to live blog the stuff you guys are doing for the members who can't come.
So you had hustle from an early age, right? Like you basically were. You said before, you're willing to kind of do whatever needs to get done.
I wouldn't define it as hustle. I like to find the gap that I can fit in to add the most value and also be like left alone to do my own stuff. So like, I'll sit behind the computer and blog and then fart around on the internet for the rest of the day. That works for me as an employee. That's what I like. Totally. So, work done. And eventually we were wiring Jenkins' house for enough Wi-Fi so we could all work there legally. He was renting a house in Berkeley Lake up in North Georgia and Gwinnett County. Hilariously, entirely coincidentally, literally right across the lake from the house I got married in to my first wife, who I was divorced from by the time I met Andy. But literally, like, I would go to work and be on his back deck and be like, yeah, I got married on those steps over there.
Did you have like, I would say if I was spending time where I married my first wife, I'd probably have like, I'd be shaking and freaking out a little bit whenever I saw it. Cause that was,
well, I mean, yeah, she wasn't there anymore. The house had belonged to her grandfather and her dad inherited it. And I think he had sold it by that time. I don't know. I didn't really keep track of her.
Yeah, that's probably for the best.
Once the court date was done, that was that. So let's see. Yeah, we're wiring his house for internet. And to this day, I can't remember if Jane, the writer who worked there, was sick or just busy. But again, yeah, I'll help out. You got extra writing stuff. I just did the blogging. Let's do it. So the first thing I wrote for Stompernet was the rewrite of the sales letter for the first relaunch after they added all the faculty in. And this time, instead of it being a box of DVDs, it's a membership site. Yeah. So I wrote that, and Jenkins, I remember him being like, this is pretty good. Do you like this? I'm like, yeah, sure. He's like, all right, we'll get good at it because that's your job now. So that's how I became a copywriter. Entirely by accident. I had no ambition to do it. I've always been good at like writing, make good grades and essays and papers and stuff.
Is that we're not, I would say that I'm driven, but I'm not ambitious, if that makes any sense, right?
It does. 100% makes sense to me.
Like I like doing stuff. I like creating stuff, but I don't care. Like you and I bonded on this kind of thing. Like you'll never see me like have a sports car or talk about crushing it and becoming a billionaire or any of that kind of crap.
I've told people before, it's got like, for me, it's got a lot to do with like Cajun value system. Like we're definitely hardworking people, but like when the oil industry first got to where I grew up and hired all those guys who were like fishermen and shrimpers and things to work in the oil field.
Guys, yeah.
Right. So they'd hire them and say, okay, well, you have a job, you go work on the oil rig for 7 days and then you're off for 7 days and then you come back. Well, they wouldn't come back once they got their paycheck. And they call them and be like, well, why aren't you coming to work? And it's like, well, I got paid and I don't need the money right now. We'll come ask you for work because they're used to just being fishermen. You fish to feed yourself. Yeah. So you sell your excess. So like it was a whole different culture where like you just work to take care of the things you need to do the things you want to do. And then you're done working. Like that's the point of work, is to finance the other stuff you want to do.
As opposed to the American idea that we have where like you live to work, right? Like you live
that was
what you do. That's who you are. Yeah.
That was always very alien to me, even as a young person. So that's how I fell into doing copywriting. Then while I was at Stompernet, I did all their blogs, all their emails, all the affiliate campaigns. I did drafts of all of our marketing, but like you said, they would hire outside people. And then we had tons of smart, talented people working within Stompernet, like Dan Thies and Leslie Roddy, and like Jeff Walker came and consulted with us and stuff about, and then of course, Andy, who's tremendous at video production.
Absolutely. So folks that don't know, Andy Jenkins had Video Boss was his big thing back in the day.
Correct. That was the first project I did when we both quit Stompernet. I helped him do the Video Boss launch, and then
cool. And then he passed away 5 or 6 years ago, I think it was.
No, actually, it was a year in October, I believe. So fairly recently.
I thought it was a lot longer ago for some reason.
No, he had kind of left internet marketing to do movie production, which is what he had always wanted to do. Yeah. But yeah, while I was working there, it was kind of, I didn't realize it at the time, but like you're learning copy with a huge list that's very responsive. The company's already successful. The gurus are already positioned. So like, it's not hard. You're just like reminding people that Andy exists. He has this expertise. It's like how I feel about selling my Chris Haddad stuff during my launch a few months ago. I was like, this is so easy compared to like traffic, Michael Fiore, $47 front end offer. Yeah, exactly. Like you don't have to explain to people who you are, and that kind of segues into it. So when Stompernet fell apart, what happened is Brad and Andy basically had what I think of as a business divorce. Yeah, and it was acrimonious, and they split. Andy, who had been like everyone's boss, left, and then Brad took over. And for whatever reason, the culture clashed. Like Brad hadn't been around in the office. Not saying
Brad doesn't strike me as a great manager either. Like I'm not a great manager either, but he doesn't seem like he has that
right. He's he's got the things that he's good at, but you're right. He did not strike me as being a good manager of people. And I say that with the personal experience of being a person, which he attempted to manage.
That's pretty good. Yeah.
But yeah, it is what it is. I decided that it was a good time to leave with the experience that I'd had. Because what I realized was I did these launches, and Andy, bless his heart, was always very open that I was the copywriter at the company, but it was still his name on every sales letter that we put out. Absolutely. So the perception was that he was the one who created the stuff, and that's just the way it was. So what I figured is I'm writing the things that are making these guys money, like literally at the point of sale where the credit card's coming out. So I can do that part. The only thing he has that I don't have is that people know who he is because he's done something worthy of a reputation. So me having never had any ambition to be a copywriter, I don't want to be an A-lister. I don't care about beating controls. I don't care about any of that stuff. I'm
You're not looking to flex, right? Yeah.
Right. So it's like all I'm missing is the reputation. So let me go on my own, specifically to have a very short freelancing career with the entire point to establish a reputation and a visibility in the audience, and then very quickly segue out of that to be, a guru figure, basically.
So before you did that, before you went on that particular path, while you're still at Stompernet, were you studying particular stuff? Because you were saying, like, I'm assuming you were at least somewhat interested in persuasion before all this stuff, or is that?
Yeah. So as like the serial storytelling came from comic books, I mentioned that. So I was always interested in that. I was always interested in trickery. So like magic tricks. I proposed to my current wife with a magic trick.
You probably studied con artists like I have as well.
Exactly. Con artistry. Big fan of Victor Lustig, who sold the Eiffel Tower not once, but twice.
Absolutely.
So con artists, trickery, psychology, but not like the medical side of it, just the like flaws in the human brain. What do you call them? Biases, psychological biases, cognitive biases, logical fallacies, just, trickery is how I think of it.
Almost like the irrationality of humans and how easy it is to push this button or that button and cause certain kind of things, because I just kind of see us as meat computers more than
and it's funny because like I was aware of the pickup artistry thing existing. Like I remember reading an article about like Ross Jeffries while I was in college.
Holy shit, Ross.
And like Rolling Stone or something, you know what I mean? Like he was just, so in fact, I remember him mentioning like NLP books, and LSU's library had the old school NLP books in the library. And I worked in the library as part of my work study. So I remember him mentioning those and me reading them. But at the time I wasn't like, I was in art school. It's not hard to pick up chicks in art school, like it's like
being in theater when I was a kid, it's like you're
right. Like you're
guys in theater, you're going to do fine.
You're an artist. You just shut up and pretend to be moody and it works. So
play your guitar in the hallway.
Exactly. So like that was never an angle for me that I felt like I had to dip into, but I was interested in the stuff. And then when I was at Stompernet, it wasn't like I had been vaguely aware that advertising agencies existed, but I kind of just presumed that someone at the company writes the ads for the company, because that's how it was at every place that I worked.
That makes sense.
So the idea that there's a freelance copywriter that you could just do that as a living it just was never something I thought about.
Absolutely.
Until I became one. So the whole thing with like the titans of the industry or like the fandom, who you're supposed to know, this guy is above that guy, the quote unquote A-list who no one knows
aspects of it.
So like there's an A-list. I don't know who keeps it. Who do you ask? Whose list is it? I didn't know any of that stuff. So what I looked at first was there were two things. First, we had our existing marketing material that was like, it was easy to just break it apart and do it.
Sure.
And interestingly enough, now that I'm thinking of this, I mentioned that I was always good at writing. I worked at the desk where people would check out books on the 4th floor at LSU's library. So I would get to see a lot of very confused and flustered students who had papers due. and I
Fair.
would sell them a paper. Like, I know where, not only do I know where the books are, I will read them for you and write your essay.
And do the work. Yeah.
Right. But like, you got to give me samples so I can write like you. I'm not going to give you an A if you're a C student, but I'll give you a C, and then you don't have to write the paper.
The teacher won't assume that it was somebody else who's smarter.
Right. So I had that, and then I had done the blogging thing and working for those guys over the course of almost 3 years. It was just learning to emulate and break things apart, figure out what they're saying and why, and just imitate it.
So you never like studied like the specific copywriting books or like the John Carlton stuff or Dan
no,
Kennedy,
in fact,
that kind of stuff.
No, in fact, the one book, I think that it's largely responsible for why I look at copy the way that I do and why I went on the path that I went on. There was this one book at the time. It was an ebook, and from what I understand, it was like the study guide for a video course or something that was no longer available, but it's you can buy the ebook off his website. It's Blair Warren.
Oh yeah.
And his book is Forbidden Keys to Persuasion, I think it's called.
That is a good one. That is a good
I bought it for like, it was like $99 at the time.
Same thing.
And he sells it now for 20. And I used to anonymously like send him an email every 6 months to be like, dude, I recommend this book 20 times a week and no one can buy it. And like, there's a copy somewhere on some server that if I Google the title of the book, I'll find the free one. Just put up a link so I can point people to it. Make you some beer money or something. He eventually did, and I still point people to that book. For those who have never heard of it, it's basically the premise of the book. It's not specifically about marketing, but it's about the idea that you can control people's decision making covertly, depending on the way you communicate with them. And he tells the story in the book, but it was like the Heaven's Gate cult.
Oh yeah.
He was having a casual conversation about that. And I believe he worked in like video production for the news, for journalism. So he was constantly like working on these type of stories, which is why he would have conversations about it. But he talked about how people are like, oh man, those guys are so brainwashed, or like they're stupid, they got tricked. And he's like, that's not it. And to understand how it really works, you have to understand that from their point of view, they were not killing themselves. They were cashing in their ticket to go ride on the spaceship. Like they 100% believed it. Right. So like, if you have that option where you feel like the world is going to be destroyed and you have the option to get your escape ticket and go ride on a spaceship, you'd be literally stupid to not do that.
It's similar to like anti-vaxxers and religious people, right? Like the anti-vaxxers I know very much do believe that, like, you know, hey, if you get this, you're going to be dead in 6 months, or what? Like, there's people that legitimately, like, it's not, and they're not necessarily. This is the thing too that I think people don't quite get. Like, people that fall into cults aren't stupid people, right? You're not. Oftentimes, people that fall into cults are profoundly intelligent, have extremely
in fact,
high IQs.
I tell people all the time, it's easier to trick people who think they're smart because they think they've got it. They think they're wearing armor, and it's like spongy. It's not armor at all.
People that say they can't be persuaded are my favorites, right? They're usually they're usually like 50-year-old white guy engineers, right? Because they're just like completely logical about everything.
Right.
And you're like, dude, you are making this so easy for me because you have no actual guard up because you think you're immune, right?
Yeah, exactly. You're just wide open. Whereas I find people like I don't want to say like dumber. I don't mean dumber, but I mean people who don't necessarily have like book smarts or think of themselves as smart are usually much more strongly critical because they feel like everybody's out to dupe them. So they have their defense. They
don't assume they're smarter than other people, right? And they're the ones who are right all the time.
They have their defenses up because it's like someone's always, everybody's got an angle, you know? Always had that interest in the trickery and being sneaky. And then I read that Blair Warren book, and it's very straightforward about what persuasion really is. And one of the things from that book that I carry forward, that's kind of one of the core principles of why the cult of copy exists, is persuasion is inherently dishonest for you to be good at it. And I point that out to people and they're like, no, but that's manipulation. Persuasion is more gentle. And I'm like,
no,
persuasion is just manipulation, but you're pulling your punches if you think of it that way. But really, the one that I used to explain it is like testimonials, right? We know testimonials work, but they work because of the cognitive bias that you think someone else's experience is going to be indicative of the experience you have. But there's no logical reason that that's true. And if I told you that before I told you the testimonial, it wouldn't work as good. But I don't tell you that because I want you to mistakenly believe that what someone else's experience. Right. So it's dishonesty of withholding information. I'm pulling your strings and you don't know how I'm doing it or that I'm even doing it. And if I told you, it would be less effective. So I'm not going to tell you. And by me keeping that,
marketers, then it's actually more effective. It's a whole other thing. Like, here's what I'm doing to you right now, and they get excited about it.
Exactly. You can be bad at marketing and sell to marketers because they're looking for what you're doing as a checklist. And you have to be blatant for them to see it. Whereas if you're doing it with regular people, you wouldn't want them to notice what you're doing.
Yeah, it's a strange shift to make when you start selling more into that market.
Yeah, it makes me think of Penn and Teller do this trick where they do a stage act and then they replace all the props on stage with transparent versions. So you can see Teller crawling around under the stage to like pop his head up in this box. And then he's got like monkey bars and he's sliding on his back underneath it. It's a great trick, but it makes me think of that where like the whole point of that trick is to show you the trick and then impress you with how hard it is. So like first they show it to you regular and you're like, oh, wow, that's amazing. And then you're like, they're trying 10 times as hard as I thought they were trying to pull this off.
I remember reading in some magic book ages ago, maybe it was a Penn and Teller thing or something like that, but he was talking about how oftentimes a magic trick is just actually doing the thing that people think is too hard to do. Right.
Yes.
In that circumstance. Like I remember seeing like some guy in Vegas, and the whole thing was there was a license plate that they had guessed the numbers that were on the license plate, but they actually printed the license plate in the back of the stage right before it came out and then banged it up a little bit to make it look old. Right? Nice.
Yeah. I think of there's a trick that I bought like the DVD to learn how to do it, and it was spoon bending. You know, like making it look like it melts in your hands. Yeah. And it's straight up like the trick is you bend it when no one's looking. Like that's the trick. It's not, there's no mystery to the fork or the spoon or anything. It's straight up like misdirection to where you didn't see me bend it and now I'm showing it to you and it's bent. And you're like, oh my God, when did that happen?
Works, right? How amazing is it that humans, I just think people want to believe these things so much, right? They want
and it's
be tricked. They want to be brought in by it.
It's really about setting up the frame where they give you the consent to do it to them. And once you have that, like it's putty, they're putty in your hands. Where were we? We're telling a story.
Let me ask you a quick question actually about Uri Geller, right? Uri Geller, of course, is the spoon bending guy. That was his whole shtick. James Randi took him out, like basically said, hey, here's why this guy is a scammer, right?
In fact, seeing Randy expose Geller on Nightline is like a childhood memory I have that's very vivid. I can remember where I was sitting in my parents' house while it was on. And they did the one where they put the book in the fish tank and he can turn the pages of the book while it's in the fish tank, or like the pencil on the edge of the table.
All those little magic tricks. But here's my question for it though, is like, you know, he got exposed by James Randi. People that are faith healers and also like scammers get exposed all the time, but most of the time it doesn't actually make them go away. It only temporarily impacts their income. You can go to people who are believers of Uri Geller and you can show them, hey, here's video of every single thing being pointed out wrong, and they'll keep going with them. Why do you think that is? What's the psychology about that, do you think?
A lot of times for faith healing, it's got to do with like the desperation of it. Like you need it to be true to save your life or the life of your loved one. So like it's 100% a leap of faith that like this has to exist. But I think I say this with the caveat that I don't really believe there are ever two kinds of people. When you say there are two kinds of people and then you name two kinds, but this is a simplification. There's people who cannot believe that magic is real. Like it just like they will not believe it. It does not work.
I can't do it. Yeah.
Then there's some people who believe in magic and they may not think of it as that, but they believe that like miracles, for example, Like if you're a religious person and you believe God can come down from heaven and perform miracles that defy all known reality, if you believe that's possible, you'll believe anything. You know what I mean? Like that to me gives me the keys to tricking you, because you believe that such a thing can happen.
Because your frame of reference for the entire world is that this kind of thing can happen.
Yes,
right?
yes.
These
What
mystical
you're
or woo-woo or whatever
what,
things are real.
What you're telling me is that there's an if, and if I hit that if, I can make you believe something even though it defies reality. If I put it in the right frame, you're going to believe it.
As long
no
as
matter
it in
what.
some way lines up with some of their pre-existing beliefs.
Exactly. And then there's some people that are just born skeptics that just like you tell them something unbelievable happened, and it's like the doubting Thomas, you know, like I got to put my finger in the hole to prove that you're Jesus. You know what I mean? Like,
or I'm even just like, well, here's the 5 other explanations for that thing that you're saying must have been a miracle. Like it could be,
right.
Did you check this? Did you check this? What about this thing? Like there's all
exactly. It's, I don't know if what it is. It's like a troubleshooting brain. I feel like it's got to go back to like ancient human tribal behaviors where you got the guy who's like 100% will believe the shaman can make it rain. Yep. And the other guy's like, I don't care, but if it rains, good. You know what I mean? Like he just doesn't buy it, but he goes along with it because that's what the tribe needs to get along.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So I think we're at how I went freelance, and the goal was to get a reputation.
You did that for a while. Go for it.
I did it for like a year, basically. But the specific goal was I knew I was going to build a community of copywriters. And what I found during that year, the stuff I was most interested in talking about was stuff that other copywriters didn't want to talk about, at least not in public, which is the kind of stuff we're talking about now.
So like the darker persuasions. Because I think what you and I have in common is that like, I think you and I are pretty ethical people overall, you know, compared to the marketing world. But we've both spent most of our adult lives learning the darkest persuasion tricks and stuff.
Right. Like, why am I going to let the bad guys have it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Like the what determines whether it's ethical or not is how I want you to end up. And if you have a pressing problem that really hurts you and you're in denial or ignoring it because you don't believe anything can help, and I have a solution, I feel like I have a duty to push as hard as I can to get you to buy it, because no one's ever going to be like, man, I love that product and it solved my problem. I just wish you wouldn't have tried to sell it to me so hard.
Yeah,
you know,
I used to say something similar when I would give speeches years and years ago, which was people would be like, they didn't want to sell, right? These was when I was talking to like massage therapists and people really like non-entrepreneurs, as I would call them. This is back when I was in my late 20s.
That's great. That's great.
And they had a real bias against sales, right? They're like, oh my God, you're the scammy salesperson, whatever. And what I would do is I would say, okay, who in this room has a really great product and you have competitors who have a shittier product who are making more money than you are? And they raise their hands. And
right.
So you're being an asshole by not selling those people harder than you are, because you're having them, because that guy is selling.
You're leaving them to the wolves.
You're leaving them to the wolves. And the thing, persuasion is persuasion. It's what works, right? It's not about like what we want to work, how we think marketing should be. It's like, these are the buttons that you push to get us.
Right. And if you make a decision to not use them, you're leaving people to the people who will use them.
Yeah.
And a lot of people who use it. Yeah, exactly. And I feel like as long as you have people's best interests in mind, you're leaving them better than you found them. You're giving them things that actually work. That's the trick. Like somebody hires me and gives me money to get their customers to pay them. Why am I going to pull punches? You know what I mean? Like, what am I hired for? I'm an assassin. I'm a hired gun. Yeah. I'm not just going to go poke them with a stick. I'm going to shoot them down. You know what I mean?
Well, it's a results-oriented business. Either you get, one of the things I love about marketing is that nobody cares how old you are, what race you are, whether you're a man or a woman. None of that matters in this business. It only really matters, like, can you get the sale or not at the end of the day?
Yeah. Well, I mean, ultimately, that's what should matter, but sometimes it does.
But in a lot of businesses, that's not true. But direct marketing, like, you know, traditional advertising isn't like that at all, because their metrics are completely, just much more vague in general, right? Whereas in this, like I you know, I was talking to my wife about this the other day. I have a recurring dream. And we all have these recurring dreams. One of my recurring dreams is that my hair grows back and I can't get rid of it, because that's a whole thing. Which I think is because when I was younger, I had really long hair, but I was really miserable. So there's something there. And another dream I have is that I just never graduated high school, which I think is a pretty common.
Oh, yeah. Right? That is a very common one.
And in that dream, I have to go back to high school. And whatever age I am now, I'm like back in high school at 44 years old, right? I'm stuck at my desk, I'm doing the thing. And then more recently, in recent years, I'm in that dream, and there's a moment in the dream where I'd go, wait a minute, who gives a fuck if I graduated high school or not? I'm a marketing guy. I can just, and in the dream, I just get up and walk out of the high school because it wouldn't matter one way or another if I actually had a diploma or not in my life. It just doesn't matter at all.
Yeah, that's true. It's all bullshit. It's all bullshit. In fact, one of the things that I did when building the cult of copy was I bought a bunch of phony credentials online to give myself a title. So I'm an ordained minister. I have a doctorate. I have a doctorate in divinity, and I'm a knight of the Order of the Bohemian Empire.
Wonderful! Holy crap! Do you have like a crest for that, or what?
Yeah, I have a letters patent. It's called, and it's basically like the dude who claims. I think he must have died or something because you can't buy it anymore online. I just looked and went offline in like 2016, but he claimed to be the heir to the throne of the Empire of Bohemia, which has not existed since, prior to World War II, I think. It's like modern day Poland is where the Kingdom of Bohemia was. But some dude with a Las Vegas post office box claimed to be that guy. And you could even be a baron, but I didn't want to be ostentatious.
No,
so I just went with the knighthood instead. I just wanted to be a knight. And then people would laugh and say like, what are you going to add, Esquire? I'm like, I'm already a knight. That would be a demotion.
I don't need to be an Esquire. It reminds me of like association marketing, back in the day, and even still now, you'd hear people that would create associations, like the Association of massage therapists. It's who made you that? Well, I just decided to create association. It's like Michael Fiore being a relationship expert. Who made you that?
Right. Or I saw someone in the relationship marketing field that referred to themselves as a sexologist, and I'm like, do you have a diploma from an actual university with that on it? Yeah. Are you a master or a full doctor of sexology?
Totally. Okay. So you were freelancing for a while. How were you going out and getting clients? What were you doing to kind of try to make that? You had never studied like copywriting books at that point. You studied persuasion. You studied that you had.
Like I knew who like Dan Kennedy was. I had bought like Breakthrough Advertising, couldn't read it. I find it to be impenetrable, and people are like, people are like, you have to read it more than once. And I'm like, isn't he supposed to be a good writer? Why do I have to read it more? Shouldn't he have wrote it 2 times to make it better and easier to read?
You make a good point there. Yeah.
But anyway, like the stuff about how to write copy didn't do anything for me because I wasn't looking at it as a writing action. It's not a writing activity. It's putting together the chain of thoughts you want somebody to have to make a certain decision. And then you write that. But it's not like formulas for writing headlines that are like, use these words. That never appealed to me because that's just not how I think about the process of putting that kind of thing together. So I knew that stuff existed, but I didn't take like a copy course or anything. But literally, like, I was on the job at a multi-million-dollar company with a list of like 100,000 people and having like dudes who have made millions of dollars with their own sales letters critiquing my copy. So like the equivalent of a high-end coaching program, but it was my day job.
But you were getting paid for it. Did you have what was I going to ask you there? Shit, I lost the train of thought. I had a question.
We'll get back to it. Yeah. So the goal with freelancing was to weasel my way onto stages so that people can know who I was and then write things that were.
So you had a plan to become a guru, right? You were like, I'm working at
Yes, that was the goal. I want
to become a guru, basically.
I wanted to do it in 5 years. It just happened a lot faster than I thought.
Good for you, dude. That's awesome. That's great.
So basically that's exactly what I did is I weaseled my way onto a few stages. Jenkins really helped me out because he hired me to do Video Boss. And then also in that era, right after Jenkins left Stompernet, if you hired Jenkins to write a sales letter for you, he hired me to write it and no one knows. So I wrote a few for him in that regard. I did Video Boss with him. I did Kajabi with him. And what he did for me was like, when he hired me, we didn't even talk about pay. He just sent me a check. And then he referred me to, I think it was Shoe Money, Jeremy Shoemaker.
Yeah, I know Jeremy,
He referred me to Jeremy for a project and told Jeremy that I charge like 20% more than what Andy had just paid me. Like, just didn't even ask, just told him this is what he charges. And then Jeremy tells me, Andy says you charge this. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds great. So I had that going on. I had done in this avenue where Jenkins was flying under his own thing and not like the umbrella of Stompernet. He told people and referred me out. Got onto a few stages, which was very easy for me because, again, I'm not a writer. So a lot of people get into writing, like to be behind the scenes and low key because it fits their personality. I'm the opposite. So I'm happy to get on stage.
For me, right? Like, I think what sets me apart from a lot of copywriters is like, I like getting on stage. I like making people laugh and do shit instead of hiding in the cave and just writing all the time.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I love talking about it. I had to get over like the same stage fright everyone has, but I got over it very easily. It was not, I love to talk about the things I love to talk about. And once I get warmed up, it comes very easily.
Absolutely.
So I did a few talks. Once you're on stage, that's your reputation in that audience, right? Once you're,
the credibility is amazing. You get on stage.
I think I read somewhere like public speaking is the second biggest fear after death. So just automatically, when people are looking up at you on the stage doing something that they're afraid to do, they feel like, well, that guy's got confidence, and if he's got the confidence, he must have the skills.
That makes sense, because for me, it's been a long time since I had any stage fright about getting up in front of anybody. But I can kind of vaguely remember it from when I was younger.
Yeah.
You had the experience of like going to a conference and being a nobody for the first day or two, and then speaking, and then all of a sudden you're a superstar.
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Like feeling your own personal status change like that, I think is a really interesting experience. Like
it's very weird that I would go to conferences and people would talk to me and ask me about something that I published that week without the awareness that like I wrote that 2 years ago. You got to refresh my memory on what you're talking about. But yeah, it's funny because the big hitters always want to go last at conferences because they want to close it out and make their sales. But I didn't have anything to sell yet, so I would go first.
Yeah.
And woe to anyone who came after me, because I would be like, look, if you buy me breakfast, I'll give you a free consultation. I learned that one from, I want to say, Sohail Khan talked at a conference, and he went first, and he said, like, I'm going to tell you the way to get free consultation from me this weekend is to just keep buying me food and drinks. Like, that's great. I'm stealing that. So I built the reputation off of that. And then through that, I made colleagues of the other people who would speak at these things. And a lot of them were, here's how to make your info products and sell them online. So they would have a coaching program, which at the time, like Skype groups were a big thing. Microsoft hadn't bought them yet. So every coach had his little mastermind group in Skype, and I would weasel my way into these and just be the guy who would answer questions about copy if you tag me. So tons of clients that way. But really, again, it was just about like raising awareness of who I was. So anywhere on the internet where somebody's like, well, who's this asshole? Someone would be like, oh, I've heard of him. Eventually I started my own Skype group, and in that group, 2 years, this would be like 2010. I remember being on vacation in Mexico and it was raining. So we were at like the cafe in the hotel, and I posted to that group, I should start a cult. And it took 2 years before I started the Facebook group and called it the Cult of Copy. And then from that point on, like that coincided with me doing the classic, I'm retiring from taking on writing clients. So I'm going to teach you my template because I'm not using it anymore. And to this day, I still teach people that like, that's the guru pivot, is when you decide your competitors are going to become your customers. Once you decide, like, I'm not competing with those guys anymore, I'm going to teach them how to do it. That's when you step into that, like, I'm a person above those guys. That's what
I'm doing right now. It's a weird experience.
It's a total positioning move that can't be beat, because people are like, well, if he's the guy who teaches the guys who do it, he must know it even better than them. And from there, it was just like, I made a bunch of trainings that were templates for the work that I got paid to do. because anytime I got paid to do something, I would turn it into a template, because that's what I did at Stompernet to even learn how to write copy. I would make a template out of what it is. And what I found is that so many copywriters treat it like fiction writing, where you start at the beginning and you write straight through until you get to the end. And like that's not the way to do it, not efficiently anyway. So the products I had an appeal because it would change the way people thought about the work process and using templates. Because I remember people at the time being like, well, I don't want it to be cookie cutter like Mad Libs. And I'm like, it's not that. It's just, here's the order you put the arguments in. You have a checklist. Now you know when you're done writing. And if you get stuck in one part, jump ahead 3 sections and finish that part. You know,
that's what I always tell people. I always write from the bottom up, right? Like I always start at the end of my letters or my VSLs, because I do the close, because the close is easy, right? The close is always going to be pretty much the same thing.
Exactly. You know, it's
going to be roughly the same thing, and you can move your way up, and then your page isn't blank anymore, right?
What my thing was is I would use the template to rapidly develop a first draft well before the deadline, and then twiddle my thumbs until I got a better idea. But if I didn't, I had a finished draft. I wasn't putting people off 2 more days after the deadline because I'd only written half of it and got stuck. So I sold those trainings one at a time, and eventually set up a membership site. And I was doing consultations and critiques the whole time. And now I have like, I don't call it coaching, because I don't call you or fuss you if you don't do what you told me you were going to do. It's more like, I call it mentoring. So if you need me, you got my number. But it's basically just a bundle of that, like consultation, critique, and then you get access to the trainings I've already done. Over the 10 years now that the Cult of Copies existed, I've just built up a huge pile of content, and now I consider myself a self-plagiarist and just a republisher of the content. So that's really all I do. So somebody commented that I get sort of manic about work in the spring. Like I'm really motivated to do a bunch of things. So they're like, man, you're posting a lot lately. And I'm like, yeah, every March you'll see me do the same thing. Check with me in May and you're going to be reading reruns. But like somebody commented that like, it's like drinking from the fire hose. And like, that's something I always wanted to do. Cause like, if you like copy and you never get sick of reading about it, I wanted to make a place where you would get tired of it before you ran out of shit to read. So that's been the mission ever since, just pack in all that content. And now that I have a pile of it, I figure, I have enough content where I can show you something different every day for a year, and you won't see the same thing twice. So within that year, if you're following me, you didn't buy something from me or learn what you needed and move on, or change your mind about being a copywriter and quit, that loop of content is long enough to where
you're gonna forget about it anyway.
It doesn't matter if I feed it in. And then even if you're a hardcore fan and try to do what I say every day, you won't be able to. So the next time it loops around, you'll be like, it's a good reminder.
So how did you, you said it was 2 years from since you kind of said, hey, I should start a cult. Actually, my friends joke about that. I always joke in the apocalypse, my only skill set is I can form a cult. Like
same thing.
I can be the leader who takes care of things.
I tell people all the time, you will know when I decided that the world is ending soon if you see me have like a Saul of Tarsus moment where I start talking about religion. Like I fell off my camel, I was struck by lightning, and now I know God is real. If you ever see me do that, that means the switch has flipped, and I think it's over. Time to build a cult.
That's fucking awesome. I feel this. It's funny because I joke about it, and then my wife tells me that she's like, "Yes, you should do that." I'm not joking at all. I'm like, "Oh, fair enough." Why did it take 2 years from when you decided to do that to like actually starting the Facebook group? And why did you decide? I mean, I had my own experience with my Facebook group in December, which was amazing because I made like $700,000 off a 2,000 person Facebook group in 3 weeks, which was pretty fucking cool. But like, how did you decide to go that angle with it? And what was the startup of that particular group like for you?
Yeah, so it took 2 years for me to do something with it because I was still like, I didn't know how long I needed to do the reputation building thing. Like I said, I had a 5-year plan, and I didn't realize it was working really good in the first year. So I could have, like, the whole story of my career is you could have done that 2 years ago.
Oh, dude, me too. Oh my God. I would have been so much richer if I started 3 years earlier with everything, you know?
Yeah. So same exact thing there. I just didn't know what it was going to be. And then I happened to just be spending a lot of time on Facebook, and groups were new. And there were several people who had tried to do groups, and they were just like extremely terrible, like just spam fest, like warrior forum-esque vibe, like 300 rules that you have to follow, where I feel like if you treat people like adults, they tend to rise to the challenge.
Except
and
for
if
the
they
ones
don't,
who don't enter your group, and then you have to ban them, because that's always
but then you do a head on a spike thing, and it brings the community together. But it really, when you put a huge amount of rules, and I learned this playing D&D, a huge amount of rules, there are people who are going to try and lawyer them up and be like, well, I'm gonna fit the letter of the law, but violate the spirit of it.
That's
so
when I played
just
Vampire in college, right? I played
Vampire
LARPs, and there were always the guy who was like, well, but if I do this with my postings and my croissants and do this, then I hit you once and you explode. And it's like, that's not fun though.
So, right, exactly. You know what's sexy about a vampire game? Math. So it was just it didn't coalesce until I was ready to pull that ripcord and say, I'm retiring from doing client work. I'm ready to start making trainings. And it crystallized that, like, okay, it's the Cult of Copy. It's clever. It sounds cool. It's the only good name. It's the only good name I've ever. People are like, how do you name stuff? And I'm like, well, all my products are like sales letter template. But the one cool name I came up with was Cult of Copy.
Dude, Cult of Copy is a fantastic brand name. Like that's fucking great.
Yeah. I'm proud of myself for that one. And then it's got like the Latin catchphrase, which if you Google that phrase, you can find the Latin forum online where I asked some Latin people to help me like make it. Like you'll find, like, I created an account on that website to ask some Latin nerds, how do I play with caveat emptor to make it say readers beware or whatever. So I think it's like readers beware because you become buyers or something like that. Nice. So that came together, and it was immediately built around like the retirement offer of I'm going to teach you my sales letter template. And I guess the rest is history. That took less than 6 months for it to hit 1,000 members. And once it had 1,000 members, it was replacing my copywriting income without me having to write sales letters for clients.
That's amazing. Yeah. Is it up to 30,000 or something now? What is it?
It's like it hovers around 38 because Facebook started actively like removing dead accounts. It used to just build and build and build, but now it's kind of like, it's like my Gmail. I never empty it, but it stays around 140 because Google keeps deleting the old ones. But it's nowhere near that many active people, obviously. But that's another thing that's great about doing a Facebook group is Facebook shows you how many people are in it, which is an authority builder, whether or not that many people actually do anything.
Yeah. It's like the opposite of YouTube video. Like there's a friend of mine who's a copy guy he's great, but his YouTube videos have like 400 views, and it's always like, it just feels slightly embarrassing in a way to see his videos out there, because it just isn't. I think, granted, that's fine when you're building a channel; it takes time and all that kind of stuff. But it's also a weird psychological thing.
Yeah, mine have even less, but I just started putting old Facebook videos on YouTube, and they're getting, I think the oldest one that I posted a week ago is north of like 50 views, which is good because I haven't done anything with it since like 2016. Again, digging into my old pile of content and stopping being lazy for the springtime to start.
You don't need huge numbers on these things to make. This is the mistake I make, right? Because like I've worked so much in consumer oriented stuff where it's like, hey, we did 9,000 sales this day at $50 a pop and all this other kind of crap. And you're thinking of these big numbers, but you can make a lot of money and do really well at a much smaller scale, depending on your price points and everything else. Like it's more about more about consistency than it is about the sheer breadth of your numbers.
Yeah, exactly. So I built myself very quickly a nice, comfortable 6-figure annual business that didn't require me to do much of anything but stuff I wanted to do anyway, which is fuck around on the internet, as mentioned before. People ask me that. They're like, wow, how much time do you have to spend in your group to get it to do that? And I'm like, I couldn't tell you because I like being there. I built it to be a cool place for me to talk about the stuff that no one else wanted to talk about, because we were talking about that earlier. copywriters that want to bring in clients don't want to be seen talking about shady shit, because they have that reputation of being a sleazy salesperson and people don't want to hire them or whatever. Or they're scared that people don't want to hire them. So I wanted to make the place where like it's the safe space for copywriters who want to talk about that dark side shit. And I'm certainly not going to judge you. I'll tell you straight up, I'm a professional liar. That's my job. So yeah, creating that space where that conversation could be had was unique at the time.
Yep.
And I think that certainly had an appeal to people, that it wasn't just a cool name, but it fit with what the message was, which is we're not going to let bad guys have the tools for their exclusive use. We're going to drag them out into the light and use them for our own benefit.
Mm-hmm. Well, cool. So one thing I find kind of interesting doing the Facebook group stuff is like, I'm so used to doing the Michael Fiore stuff where it is very, it almost feels like a video game to me when I'm playing that particular character, right? Because it's mostly email. I'm not interacting with the people much because they're crazy. And if I interact with them, they fall in love with Michael Fiore. We get stalkers, all that other kind of stuff. And then working with my Facebook group, it was a weird experience to be like, you're getting interactivity from people in a way that you just don't otherwise. And I had to remember that my buyers are actual people, instead of just little buttons that I hit out on the internet to kind of get things to go. I don't even know where I was going with that, but like, what's the biggest thing you've kind of learned, I don't know, marketing wise or whatever else, by doing your group for these years? What was the biggest lesson that kind of came to you that was like, hey, here's how I actually do this to make it blow up or make you as happy as possible or whatever?
I mean, it really comes down to a lot of those like cult building lessons and the understanding of what, I think the understanding of the difference between persuasion and influence is very important. Mm-hmm. Persuasion is,
what do you think go ahead.
Persuasion is in the message, and influence is who the message is from.
Fair. Yeah.
And it's one of the common things that I see wrong with a lot of sales material is that you don't know whose voice the message is from. You don't know whose mouth those words are coming out of. So when you make someone a promise and it's not coming from a person, it doesn't seem real. Like, who's making me that promise? Yeah. But if you have an identity that they can connect to it and you believe that person, it doesn't matter what they say because you believe the person.
Because you've bonded with them in some credibility in your eyes, you've bonded with them, et cetera. Yeah.
Yeah. And this is something I picked up on working at Stompernet and then doing all these affiliate offers. Like we would promote, like this is when they had the quote unquote syndicate. And all those dudes would promote each other's $2,000 products in a rotating cycle, and no one else.
Walker and Kern and all those other guys.
Yeah, Walker and Kern and Andy and Brad and several other guys. So
Phil Sanders,
yeah. So the Kern thing is that you would see all these affiliates try and do the same thing he would do, which is just like, I think you guys will like this. Check this link out. And then he would be like the #1 affiliate. And it's like, it's not the words he's saying. It's that everyone who sees those words knows who Frank Kern is and has certain beliefs about him. And I didn't learn until years later. It's a sociologist has this term he calls exformation. And information is what's in the message. Exformation is what's in your brain that lets you add context to that message. Mm-hmm. So if you use persuasion to give people exformation over time so that they know who you are, what you're about, what your values are, what you stand against, all of this stuff, then you can give them shorter and shorter messages. The persuasion's not as important because who you are is what's most important. It's similar to people who ask me what's the best email subject line, and it's making the from field matter, because then it doesn't matter what the subject is. They're opening it because of who sent it.
So to the point you were go ahead. To the point that you were making, I was just on your Cult of Copy website before we chatted. Because I'm like, I might as well check this out a little bit. And I saw the copy that you have for signing up for your email list, and it's the kind of thing that I would do, right? Because it's the kind of thing that it's very much like, sign up for my list or don't. It's up to you, but you'll be really happy if you do.
Right.
And you can get away with that, and I can get away with similar things. Because in my sales letter for, I think it was my sales letter for the Pig Method stuff, I had the multi-pay and the single pay, and the single pay said, "Shut up, Haddad, take my money," and here's the single pay. And then the other one said, "Shut up, Haddad, take less of my money now, but more of it overall." And then I had a button next to it, right? And I can get away with that because there's a humor aspect and a certain fuckery aspect. You can kind of do your thing, but somebody else, like David Deutsch, writing that kind of thing just wouldn't work because it's so different from he's very credible in the marketplace, but it doesn't fit his persona or what he puts out.
Exactly. I mean, one of the reasons I wanted to create a persona that was similar to me and attitude and affect. Like I tell people the like Colin Theriot is a real guy. The Reverend Dr. Sir Colin D. Theriot, Pontifex Maximus of the Cult of Copy, is the same dude, but I'm like, he's a cartoon character. Yeah. He's playing up certain aspects. So
it's like being a pro wrestler, right? You're taking parts of your personality and amping them up to the extreme.
Exactly. And what that allows you to do is I can do things in my persona that David can't do, because he has to maintain that respectable positioning.
Yep.
Because that is his selling point. Whereas I have the irreverence built in.
Yep.
To where I can say, when people come into the Cult of Copy and they're like, I'm shocked you people talk like this. I'm like, you voluntarily joined the cult. You asked me to be in here. So like, you can't say I lied to you about what was like, it's on the banner, what you're signing up for.
It's right on the tin.
So having that position of being the provocateur of a kind certainly makes it so that it's funny, because you asked earlier about like how these guys build these bulletproof personas that people believe, no matter what, how much battery they take or how they get disproven. I'm not saying it's exactly this, but this idea that you can create a bulletproof persona by having that sort of provocative, controversial kind of mess with people angle, because you can always play anything off as, did I say that? Or did I mean that? Or, is it all part of a setup? It's something I have trouble with too, because people will pick up on something I did and say like, what were you doing here? Like, what was the thought process? And I'm like, it's an accident, Yeah. Like, people perceive me as having all these devious plans all the time because I talk about having devious plans,
that's
but
like
really,
my launch. People after my launch were like, oh man, I've watched your launch and every single detail was so well orchestrated. And I could tell how you had it all. I'm like, I didn't have anything prepared whatsoever.
That's awesome. I was going to ask you about that, because one of the things that you did, I actually pointed a few clients at your launch to show people like you don't have to make the product and then do the launch as two separate things. You can say, hey, I'm making this product, and updating them on the progress doubles as the launch, which I had never done it that way. I did one a couple of years ago where it was like a 13 video series, and I gave them all away for free. But when I would do the next one, I would delete the previous one. And all of them were like, if you like this video, it's number 7 of 13. Give me $13 and I'll put you in the group where all 13 of them will live. I did it just as an experiment, and the experiment worked. So then I did a training about how to do live Facebook launches in that way, where instead of writing a promo, the content is the promo. If you want to pay attention and like download all 13 yourself and be on the money, more power to you. If you want to put in the effort, I will reward you with it. But for everyone else who wants the convenience, I'll put them all together for you and you just pay me.
I just found doing the product that way it's funny because when I'm doing things often marketing wise, persuasion wise, I am both being incredibly sincere and am extremely conscious of the persuasive power of that sincerity and what part of that sincerity I'm putting out in the world, if that makes any sense.
It does.
Like, I know what buttons I'm pushing, but I also, like, my students in my Pig Method stuff are like, oh my God, you really seem to care so much. Like, well, I do care so much. And also I want you to feel like I care so much. Like,
right.
Standpoint, right?
That's
I do, but also,
that's something I teach people when I coach them and like marketing their way into guruhood is that there's so many positive qualities that you have, that you have, that society says like, you should just be silently a good person, right?
Yeah, totally.
But like, you have to put that on display because it's not detectable, it's invisible otherwise. So you have to broadcast as though you're faking it, because otherwise people won't know it's there at all. So you have to do the same thing that the liar will say about like, you can trust me. You have to be explicit about it because it's invisible. Trustworthiness is invisible until someone makes a gamble and you pay off.
Test it in some way.
Yeah. So
do you ever think of, so one thing I do in my own stuff is I quite honestly, I think maybe I got this way because of Michael Fiore, because I feel like he's always felt like a different person to me because he's just not me.
Right.
There's things Michael Fiore would not do that I do all the time, et cetera, et cetera. But as I've transitioned over into more of the marketing guru stuff, I quite literally think of myself as a different person when I'm working on my own stuff, right? I think of Chris Haddad, my client, as opposed to Chris Haddad myself, so I can get enough perspective from the outside to be like, what should I be putting out there of this person? What would be the best thing to kind of do? And it helps me get away from myself enough to be able to do that.
Yeah, I can relate to that. Again, creating the cartoon character, cult leader version of myself is me doing that. It's very I don't know, I think of it almost as like a superhero secret identity thing.
Totally.
Like in fact, my glasses prescription is so weak that the eye doctor made fun of me for wanting glasses.
Having them?
Yeah. And when I have them on, people think I wear them all the time because I wear it in video, but it's like a reverse Superman thing. It's like, it's a prop. So it's like you put this on and now you're the guy.
Does putting that prop on give you, because I've done some acting and such in the past, and props are a big thing. Do you almost feel like, does putting the glasses on help you get into the proper state for this stuff at this point, because it's kind of connected in some way?
Yeah, I would say less the act of putting it on, but seeing myself in the camera with the glasses on, because it doesn't look like me because I don't wear them when I brush my teeth. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like
totally.
I don't like it shows me reflected back to me in a way that I don't actually see myself. So that helps with that. But again, it's not, I don't know, it reminds me to maybe be like more higher energy than I normally am. It reminds me like introducing myself as the Reverend Dr. Sir Colin Theriot puts you in a different mood than if I was like, hey, it's Colin. You know what I mean? It just, totally. it sets a different frame to do different work. And again, that work,
it kind of prepares people for a certain thing, right? It prepares you for a certain tone or a certain wackiness, almost like you're dealing with somebody who's not just some regular guy you met on the street.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like it's funny because I'll tell people to do things like method acting, but for writing, because people will be like, I don't like, how do I sound confident in my writing? I'm like, pretend that you're a confident person and then write as though you're that person. And they're like, you know, it sounds stupid, but it really does work.
But it works, yeah.
Yeah, it does.
I do method acting for marketing and method acting for marketers, and one of my things.
Yeah, and it's funny because the people who will tell me that are people who come into writing like from a fiction background. They're like a struggling novelist or whatever, and I'm like, you ever make up a character that comes to life on the page and you're surprised by what they do? Same concept. Like make up a character about yourself and then write as though you're that person. But yeah, the separation between influence and persuasion, and learning that like persuading strangers to do things that you want them to do is hard.
Oh yeah.
Persuading people that you're influential and should be someone to be listened to is easy with persuasion. So if you become an influential person first and then persuade from that influential position, the persuasion becomes much easier.
It's like con artists, right? Like con artists get to know the ones that are doing longer cons or bigger cons. You get to know the person. There's multiple touch points.
Yeah, and
it's over the course of time.
Yeah, and we just talked about how like things like honesty and integrity are invisible. Con artists have figured out how to show you things that make you believe that about them without you even realizing it happened. Yeah. And that's why if you are an honest person with integrity, you should learn how a con artist does that, so you can show it to your audience because you really can back it up. And I think it's in that Blair Warren book. He tells a story about a news interview that Ted Turner did. And while the guy's following around writing the article or whatever, Ted stops his pickup truck and gets out and picks up a can that was littered on the side of the road and throws it in the back of his pickup truck and then gets back in. And they drive away. He doesn't mention it. He doesn't say what he's doing.
Just does it. Yeah.
It just he does it as though it's like a habit he has, which the writer 100% picked up on and framed it the right way. And that just, to me, was a fantastic example of showing people a quality through a demonstration that you don't have to tell them. You know, like you can tell Ted Turner really cares about the environment. He's not bullshitting you, because he stops and picks up litter, even though he's a billionaire. like
Yeah, that actually comes to a point that I was going to ask you about, actually, because I was thinking about how people present themselves out in the market, and even what I personally do, right? Like occasionally I'll get really mad on Facebook, and I'll get
Mhm.
really mad at somebody ripping me off or something, and I'll say all sorts of things, and I'll
Oh
be
yeah,
self
yeah.
righteous and etc. And I was talking to Mike Helikakis, who works really closely with me. He's like, "Oh, are you okay? You seem really upset." I'm like, "I'm not that upset at all."
Right.
He's like, "Well, it's." I'm like, "Mike, I both do believe everything I'm saying here, and I do think these people are assholes, and I will send lawyers after them, but whatever. And it's largely performative. The level of energy that goes into it is largely performative because it's part
Hmm.
of my character out in the market, right? To
Right.
be somebody who is willing to draw a line, who's willing to say, hey, don't just swipe and steal everything. Here's the thing. That is all
Yeah.
part of the deal on purpose. So again, it's just about amplifying that kind of energy when that kind of thing comes up. Plus, it scares people so they don't steal from me as much. I get really mad.
Right. Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
It's showing people who your villains are is
Yeah.
a great way for them to get a positive idea of who you are. It's something I talk to clients about who have trouble like figuring out what their elevator pitch is or what their
Yep.
brand line is or whatever the buzzword is they refer to it. What I tell them is, if you can't think of what you are, tell people what you're definitely not. Describe what you're
Absolutely.
against. Describe
Mhm.
what is the opposite of you. Because I think, again, I go back to art. If you're drawing a picture of something, you can start with a line and draw the outline of it, and there it is.
Yep.
Or you can take your black charcoal and black out everything on the paper that's not what you're drawing, and it
Mhm.
still is the same shape.
Mhm.
So that idea of carving out who you are by saying what you're not is a very strong way to create a position in the market in a literal sense. Like, where are you standing relative to all the competition in the space? That's how you carve out that spot, as
It
saying,
also
well, I'm
creates more
definitely
tribalism, right? Because
it,
people that agree with you are attracted. Like I always just
it
say, if you're not offending somebody, if you're not offending somebody, you're doing it wrong, right? As far as this kind of stuff goes,
right, because for
yeah,
some people, who you offend is a marker of them being in the right place.
exactly, yeah,
You gotta, if you figure out who your villains are, people know they're in the room with the hero.
yeah,
Um, so it's the same thing where, like, if you talk about something being bad, people presume you would never do it. Like,
hmm,
for you, people know or presume
yeah.
that you would never download a pirated version of a course,
I
that
wouldn't.
you never plagiarize someone else's sales letter.
Hell
Even
no.
if you would, people would presume you wouldn't, because you were so mad about that time that one guy
They
did
wouldn't.
it
Yeah,
and you blew it up. So
I did steal some music from back in the day from like
yeah,
Napster.
yeah,
I'll admit that,
yeah,
but
yeah.
not since then, really. Yeah.
Yeah, I still pirate D&D material when they don't put a preview on the
Oh, fair
PDFs.
enough. Yeah.
So, like, if it's not on a store shelf and I can flip through it to see if I want to buy it, I'll go look at Scrib to see if some asshole
Yeah.
uploaded it. And if I like it, then I'll
Then you
buy
go buy
it.
it. Yeah. Then you go buy it. Yeah. Which is the thing that only happens when you get older. I remember like being in my 20s and such, like you just can't afford to buy it at that point. So you end up just kind of
Right,
stealing it or
exactly,
whatever. And then
exactly.
hopefully you make up for that when you get a little bit older and a little bit grayer. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. You pay it back eventually. Um, but yeah, looking back on the 10 years of the Cult of Copy thing, the thing I'm leaning more into now is looking at what that guru relationship is. I feel like that's kind of where, like, the future of marketing is heading,
Mm-hmm.
because
Yeah.
like, anonymity is not going to be as big of a thing. Like, people, if given a choice, people are going to want to support someone they know, as opposed
Absolutely.
to
Yeah.
a faceless conglomerate that sells an item they know nothing about. So creating that difference and figuring out who your position is in the market, who you're going to be to people, what you're going to represent to them. That's kind of, looking back on the 10 years of stuff that I've done, that's what I think is valuable for people moving forward.
I think so too. Yeah, because one of the reasons I stopped doing the Michael Fiore stuff is because to really blow that up to where I used to be, I would need to be Michael Fiore on a regular basis, right? I would need to
Right.
be doing videos. I need to go back and do media tours and all that kind of crap that I just don't want to do, which is why I kind of decided to put that to bed a little bit. Because you can't just, it's the days when you could just have your PD, your sales letter or your sales video that goes in. Oh, we lost your video there. If you're still there.
Oh,
There we go. I think are kind of over, right? Because people are so used to having intimacy with the people they're learning from. And even big companies, I feel like you need a face that goes along with it. You need a person, you need a story that goes along with it that just isn't just your company. It's like the people behind the company, I think, that matter a lot more.
Very true. So the reason my screen went blank just now is it gave me the 10% battery warning. So I'm gonna get my phone ready to go and hop in if it dies while we're chatting.
Well, we can go like an hour and 15 already anyway, so we can just stop in a few minutes if we don't have anything else to
sure.
Yeah. We'll have you again some other time.
I guess it's up to you. What else do you want to know?
I don't know. I mean, there's so much stuff that we could talk about. What do you think is if you had like somebody who was just getting into copywriting, marketing, shit like that these days, what advice do you think you would give them?
I would say it's very similar to what we talked about, to where don't put yourself in a position where you're competing with people. Mm-hmm. Like, be aware of how you're presenting your business and your services. So I run a jobs board from the Cult of Copy, but I created it because I was tired of people posting jobs in the group, because it's not good for a discussion group.
Totally.
So it's really just like, go put this over there. But so many people go into those jobs boards, and some people get mad because they're like, these jobs pay pennies on the dollar, blah, blah, blah. How dare you? How dare you? Mm-hmm. And I kick them out of the group for doing that, because who wants to post jobs in a group where the people you're trying to hire are going to complain?
Yeah.
Looks bad. Don't do that. But more to the point, what I tell people is anytime someone posts a job like that in a place where people are going to compete for it, they're looking for a discount. Like, that's, they want the best work for the cheapest price. That's the only reason to open it up to
or something.
It's the only reason to open it up to competition. So what I tell people is, look on the jobs boards for companies that you want to work for, because if they're posting a job, that means they respect writers and will hire them. Yep. But don't apply for the job. Contact them directly and pitch them a project based on your research of what they need. Mm-hmm. So do what you're supposed to do as a marketer, and market your services to them in a way that matches what their needs are, and show them you understand what those needs are. Because otherwise, what are you even selling? That's like a huge question I hear all the time from beginners, is like, how do I find clients? Like, literally every business that exists needs copy. If you don't know how to convince them to hire you, what are you even selling? That's the job, is to get people to give you money for what you're telling them you have. So if you can't do that for yourself,
you should be able to sell yourself.
Right. If you can't do that, that's how you know you can do it, is when someone gives you money to do that service for them. But yeah, I think that's the biggest one for people coming into it, is that it's definitely not like any copywriting coach who's like, copy and paste this template and email it to 100 people and that's how you get a job. Like, that's not going to do anything for you. And you're competing with the people who literally can undercharge you by like 10x and still be living comfortably in the part of the world where they live.
That's true. Yeah.
So like, why put yourself in competition with that way? Instead, you proactively take control of your lead generation and your marketing, and figure out who you want to work for, what work you want to do what you have to do to get your foot in the door. And then the next step is convince them to pay you to do every bit of work they have that you want to do. And maybe even pay you to outsource and manage the work that you don't want to do. But that's basically it. Like, think of it as a business and take control of your product and your services and how you market yourself. Because it's definitely not like, you can't come up from zero the way that you used to.
Just being good isn't going to get you any work, right? Like, you have to be good.
Yeah.
And people have to know that you're good. They have to hear about you. They have to kind of have some attachment to your name or some kind of reputation or something. Or you're just fading.
Yeah, I would even say you if you have the right reputation, you don't have to be as good.
I would agree. Yeah.
because like, first of all, they're not comparing you to anyone else. It's not like they're hiring me and you to each write a sales letter, and whoever wins gets the job.
Yeah.
If they pay enough to the person they believe can do it, that's the result they believe is possible, because they're not comparing it to anything else
all the time, which is, you're not competing with the A-listers or the greatest copywriters. Like, that's the big, I think that was you that posted that up.
Yeah. I do say that a lot. Yeah. It's always, that's another one too, is to go back to that fandom idea of the copywriting industry. your average business owner doesn't know shit about that. They don't know who those dudes are. They don't care what their opinion is, unless you specifically want to go work for like the big newsletter, financial mailers. Like yeah. Unless you want to go compete with those guys, more power to you. But that is not the road of copywriting. That is not the job. I would say the best thing for any copywriter to do is get clients to pay you to learn to get good enough to sell your own stuff, and then you're done, right? That should be the real goal. Like, I don't care about.
Kind of sucks, ultimately speaking.
It does. It does.
I haven't done it in 10 years either, right? Yeah.
Exactly, because all you're doing is giving yourself more bosses than a normal person has. So the goal should be to get out of that as fast as possible with what you know how to do. And unless you have that competition in you where you want to beat controls, don't listen to dudes who see that as like the top level goal, because what they're learning and what they're doing is not necessarily what will get you what you want. Like, you can make a really nice living as a copywriter serving small businesses that no one's ever heard of. Like I got a friend who's a marketing manager for a company that sells software for like diesel management or something. I don't even really understand what it is, but like super niche, but like it's big, heavy equipment type shit. So it does make a lot of money, but it's so niche, and you can make a nice living doing that. Or
they still need copy that has personality and communicates to people.
Yeah, he literally just hired
the people that are buying that are real people, right? It's
exactly. He just literally had to hire a content person because he's like, there's no content about this. It doesn't exist. We need someone to research it and write it, because no one's ever sat down and wrote the content to appeal to the kind of person that needs to buy this stuff. So looking at opportunities to help people make more money in their businesses. And there are these small, not anonymous, but like businesses you never heard of, probably in your town, that make over $1 million a year, but they're out in some industrial park collecting email addresses from customers because they know they're supposed to, but no one who works there ever emails them.
Yeah.
So you could be that guy and take the same knowledge about email marketing from like a $6 ebook from 1998 and make that company hundreds of thousands of dollars every week just by emailing them something when they're doing nothing right now. So like finding those opportunities to compete with no one and compete with nothing, instead of trying to beat a control, find a spot in your client's business where there's no copy and some copy would make money. You know, the big one I point people to is self-liquidating offers, where like after you subscribe and you hit the thank you page, make a cheap offer right there. Tons of people don't do that. You put something there, you're going to start making the money. They're going to be like, every idea this guy has will make us this money.
It's because they made you free money. So what other free money comes down the pike? Yeah.
Exactly. So you position yourself to be the guy who finds those holes and patches them. They'll let you do any projects you want.
That also sets you up for some potential profit sharing too, right? Because if you're going in and basically saying, you know, if you got the right reputation or whatever else, or you can negotiate it, but you can set yourself up and you go, hey, I want X% of the money that you're not making right now. And a lot of people will say yes to that because it's conceptual money.
Right. It's a slice of a non-existent pie as far as they're concerned. Sure, take half.
As opposed to taking a percentage of what they're already making, where they're
exactly
like, well, that's mine, but that's it's a human bias about a little bit of loss aversion or whatever else it's going to be.
Yeah, that's something I tell mentoring students all the time, is that when you're selling copy services, you need to make them understand that your fee is a percentage of the money that you're going to make them.
Yeah,
they're basically front paying you out of future profits. And if you make that come true one time after you've explained it to them, they'll see every project you pitch them as that way, where like, well, we're going to make a lot more than he's going to ask for, so let's hire him to do it.
Yeah, but then the number doesn't matter anymore at that point.
Exactly.
It's just the percentage. Same thing with like people have tried to hire me and they're like, we'll give you X thousands. And I'm like, because they think they're going to make millions off it. So it kind of makes sense. And then I'm like, but I don't want to do the work, so I'm not going to. So, I just don't feel like it. I'm sorry. I just don't feel like it.
I've been in the same boat. You're telling me if I gave you $100,000 right now, you wouldn't write a sales letter? For what? Real estate? Nope. No, I don't want to do that.
Not really interested. I got other stuff I want. The thing is, like, since I transitioned away from what I was doing before, the relationship is always stuff was fun, but I was doing some partnership deals with friends on health offers and stuff like that. And since I transitioned to doing my own stuff, I'm like, oh, this is actually fun compared to working in a niche I just don't care about and don't want to be caring about and don't want to be focused on anyway. You can't pay me enough to write like weight loss letters I just don't want to do. Like at the end of the day, I just don't want to do them. I don't enjoy them.
Yeah. I mean, you've pulled off that Band-Aid. It's going to be really hard for you to do anything but be yourself for a living.
Yeah.
Because
I don't have to do any research. I can write whatever I want and
right.
be funny and weird and swear a lot. It's a great time.
Yeah. And I mean, you build a funnel like that positions you as a guru. People are going to ask, like, what people want from you is what you're doing. They want to know how to do what you're doing, which like I'm the number one expert at that because I invented it as I go. So if you want to know how to do what I've done, there's no one else you can ask.
That's why folks who want me to do a course on how I did my launch, my film, I still have to do this course about how I created my incredibly detailed, well planned out.
A ton of my trainings are basically like, let me go back and reverse engineer what I did so I can explain it to someone else. And I usually end up learning a lot. In fact, I've taught a course on doing that. It's like you got to do a postmortem because you're going to learn more pulling it apart and figure out how to do those accidents on purpose the second time.
Absolutely. Let me finish up with one last question here, as we're almost an hour and a half in. We should close it up anyway. What does success mean to you? I mean, do you feel like you're successful at this point? Do you feel like you've achieved everything I mean, are you? For me personally, I went so much higher than I ever thought I was going to in my career, right? I never had ambitions to be a big business person or make billions of dollars or anything like that. So when I started making millions in my 30s, I was just like, this is crazy. This is so much more than I ever thought possible. I don't need to kind of like keep pushing or whatnot. Do you feel like you've reached success at this point? Do you still have a higher place you want to go to, whether that involves money or not? Or what's your goal at this point?
I just want to keep doing it. You know what I mean? Like I haven't gotten bored of it in 10 years. That's awesome. I feel like I have, I'm working on my first training in 2 years, and I'm just coming back to it because it's been a weird couple of years for everybody. But I built something that didn't require anything of me over the past couple of years and just kept running. And I have more to say about the topic. It's a bottomless topic, so I just want to keep doing it. It doesn't get smaller unless I stop. Yeah. It only keeps growing. And some percentage of the people who discover anything about me are eventually going to buy something from me. Yeah. So I just keep doing it in more and more places. Like they can just keep inventing new social media sites and I'll start sticking my shit over there. Yep. But yeah, that's it. I just want to keep doing it. I'm not transitioning out to doing something else. I might put stuff in different formats. I keep threatening to write ebooks, like to put on Amazon or something. Oh, sure. Yeah. I'm sure you'll see collections of shit I already wrote getting assembled, slap a theme on it and put it up there. But yeah, it's just do a comic. You know what you should do? We should do some kind of comic book at some point. Just like write some kind of comic strip or comic book and have you, have you illustrate. I think it'd be kind of fun. It could be. I'm rusty, but I can warm up fast. Fair enough. Well, cool. Let's finish up. This was great. This was exactly what I wanted it to be. Do you have anything else you want to chat about before we kind of take off for the day? No, man. I feel like I did have a few questions, but I think we covered them. And what we were talking about is the main one was like how much of that launch did you plan? Yeah. And it's good to hear it was intuitive, but also effective because you know what you're doing. So it's like but it's also 20 years of experience, right? Like exactly. So it's like a solo by an accomplished jazz musician, but the guy like knows what he's doing. So he's not just messing around, but he did just make it up. But it does sound good. But you know what to make up. Like even I pivoted during that launch quite a bit. I changed this, I changed that. Yeah. Whatever. I like being live in the middle of it and being able to feel the crowd, like much like being on stage. Performance is a big one for me too. Like I don't record courses by myself. Everything's done live and then I package it up because I need to feel like somebody's there or else I'm talking to myself and that feels weird. The worst part for me is when I give speeches. I did this, If I Wasn't Rich, I'd Be Dead thing at Copy Accelerator a couple of years ago. And it's a sad speech, right? It's about my car wreck and the Lyme disease and the bipolar and everything else. But it's also full of jokes because I always put jokes in my shit. Well, giving that speech and being like, am I just like failing miserably up here right now because nobody was laughing? Right. Stuff that I'm just used to. I'm like, I got in a horrible wreck and crippled for a couple of years, whatever. You just don't think about it anymore. And they're all just like ashen face the entire time. Yeah. Like, but I had a great dick joke in there. Come on. What you got to do is make them cry first.
That's true.
And then the laugh comes as a relief. They're ready to laugh.
True.
If you push them so hard that they're crying.
Comic
So
relief.
that's a tip.
Yeah.
That's a tip. Make them cry and then make them laugh. Because if you do it the other way, they leave sad.
It's all about that last moment, right? The final
Yeah.
That's awesome, man. Thank you so much for doing this. This was great, and I will definitely have you back at some point in the future as I keep this going. Because theoretically, I'm doing this every week, so hopefully it'll.
Well, nice. Well, my pleasure. I look forward to it. When it's ready, let me know, and I'll pass it around.
Sounds great. And for folks who are listening, go check out Colin's Cult of Copy group on Facebook. You'll learn a lot of stuff. He puts a lot of great shit there pretty much every day.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah. And then you can buy something from him as well. So that'd be great.
Right. Only if you want to. Yeah, take it or leave it. It's up to you.
Totally. Super casual. I don't care. In fact, maybe I was writing some copy for something the other day about like, here's who should not buy this. I always love writing that kind of thing.
Oh yeah.
It just pokes people. They're just like,
yeah.
Like, am I that person? Shit. What should I do? All right, man. Cool. I'm gonna stop the recording, right?
Awesome.